Tonight, pellet plant, a possible shot in the arm for the Fort Nelson economy. Just around the corner, the Northern Rockies prepares for wildfire season. An energy plea. Oil and gas companies press Ottawa for action. Well, good evening and thank you for joining us. And we begin tonight with a $20 million investment from the federal government to shore up wood exports from BC's forest sector. In what might be a lifeline for the Fort Nelson economy, a wood pellet mill many argued would never get off the ground is now set for a major funding boost. The Fort Nelson First Nation is set to receive $250,000. That money will go towards further establishing a partnership with Peak Renewables. Now, the goal is to convert an idle Canfor sawmill into a large-scale wood pellet plant. However, the project has had a long and tumultuous history in the region, a region long dependent on the resource sector. Back in November of 2022, the band gave Peak $1 million loan to advance the project. Initial startup for the plant that would be the largest of its kind in Canada was set for early 2022. Now, so far, no new timeline has been provided as to when the mill may actually become operational. Wildfire season is right around the corner, and with that in mind, Fort Nelson's Fire Smart and Resiliency Committee now taking a proactive approach and seeking input on how to enhance wildfire safety in the Northern Rockies. Residents are being asked to fill out a survey that will help shape what resiliency plans look like for the region. The Northern Rockies Regional Municipality also seeking input from BC Hydro. They're asking the utility to attend a community Fire Smart meeting to leverage their resources and expertise on wildfire fuel mitigation. Now, while it's too soon to tell what the fire season will look like, managing and reducing the fuel loads will help with prevention and directly impact a fire's behavior. They're calling BC Hydro's participation essential in developing and implementing a strategy. Meetings are held bi-weekly with residents having until March the 28th to complete the survey. Last year, 4,800 people were forced to evacuate their homes after high winds and dry conditions fueled the Parker Lake wildfire. The forestry watchdog says the province broke the law following a complaint by the Halfway River First Nation on the approval of 2 range use plans. The complaint dates back to 2023, the First Nation raising concerns about the impact grazing has had on cultural sites. They worried that livestock were damaging culturally significant mineral licks and displacing wildlife within the territory's watershed. The Forest Practices Board investigated the complaint and found the government approvals were not in compliance with the Forest and Range Practices Act. The range use plan exceeded the 5-year term set out in the Act, and the board also argued the manager who granted approval did not consider the impact of grazing. They're now recommending range use planning, including engagement with First Nations. They're also calling for enforceable action to protect resources and drinking water. The Halfway River First Nation, one of 39 Treaty 8 nations, has the right to use the entire territory for hunting, fishing, and cultural activities. Well, 14 CEOs from major Canadian energy companies, including many with operations right here in the Peace region, are urging federal leaders to strengthen economic sovereignty. They want Mark Carney, Pierre Poilievre, Jagmeet Singh, and Yves-François Blanchet to address oil and natural gas challenges by expanding the energy sector. In an open letter, they asked that leaders simplify regulations, set firm project deadlines, and remove the 35% emissions cap. It also calls for the repeal of the carbon levy and support for Indigenous co-investment. Now, the CEOs are stressing the importance of collaboration between industry, government, and residents to unlock Canada's full energy potential. They argue that expanding oil and gas exports will boost the economy, create jobs, and position Canada as a trusted energy provider to our allies. They add Canada could tackle global energy poverty while cutting carbon emissions with LNG and carbon capture. Among those who signed the letter with operations here in the Peace region, TC Energy, Tourmaline, Pembina, and ARC Resources. The letter comes as U.S. President Donald Trump hit Canada with a 10% tariff on oil and gas exports earlier this month. Well, a man with a long criminal history wanted by police has been taken into custody. Devin Calliope was arrested in Fort St. John Tuesday night. Police say the suspect was allegedly trying to break into a truck in a parking lot near 112th Avenue. The 29-year-old was taken into custody. Callio was wanted for 2 counts of breach of release orders and 1 count of dangerous operation of a motor vehicle. Now, he has a lengthy criminal record, including several counts of break and enter, flight from police, robbery, and firearm offenses. Despite being charged over 20 separate times in the past for breaching his release orders, a judge released Callio on bail. On Monday, police announced they were looking for Callio after they allege he was breaching his latest bail condition by leaving Prince George and traveling to the Peace region. Well, he currently remains in police custody pending his next court appearance. Fort St. John RCMP are thanking the public for their help in finding a missing teenager. Mounties have not released details surrounding Luna Ellison's disappearance. They did report that the 16-year-old went missing on Monday. Now, police have only said Ellison has been located, but didn't elaborate as to where or how. Well, frustrated healthcare professionals in British Columbia are calling for more security and consequences when they're assaulted on the job. They say violence in the workplace is growing, and policymakers need to act to prevent more people leaving the medical field. Penny Daflos has the details.
From the emergency department to public areas and family doctors' offices, it's not unusual for healthcare workers to face violence.
Anger to the point of pushing, shoving, hitting of our physicians and our staff, even in our family medicine clinics, our maternity clinics.
Inappropriate comments, touching, unwanted advances, and even just assaults in the back of the ambulance.
There was a nurse the other night that was actually choked unconscious. So what the media is reporting on, I would say, is a fraction of what's actually taking place.
Mounties are recommending charges after a man allegedly punched a nurse at Langley Memorial Hospital this month, but criminal charges for assaults against healthcare workers are unusual.
We definitely need a zero tolerance policy in place, and we need more security, particularly in our hospitals, our emergency rooms, and our clinics.
There needs to be a level of accountability where if somebody is abusive or assaults a first responder, whether it's a paramedic, firefighter, or even a police officer, there needs to be accountability.
The BC Prosecution Service tells CTV News, unlike assaults against police officers, incidents against healthcare workers or in medical settings aren't in a special category in their system. Anecdotally, violent incidents on the job are increasing.
The patient came out wielding a machete, waving it in the air, yelling and screaming at us.
In a statement to CTV News, the Attorney General described an assault on a healthcare worker as a serious criminal offense and that health authorities have increased the number of security staff at hospitals.
If it is not safe for healthcare workers to do their job, it's actually not safe for the patients either.
A warning healthcare workers will continue to deliver as they remain in the line of fire. Penny Daflos, CTV News, Vancouver.
The Vancouver Auto Show getting underway today after kicking Tesla out of the event last night. Well, now advocates are using the show to call on the British Columbia government to dial back its ambitious 2030 electric vehicle mandate. The chair of the Energy Futures Institute says the mandate is not attainable. Barry Penner adds the province needs to reconsider the idea because of Donald Trump and BC's own dependence on imported electricity. As for Tesla, the automaker is noticeably absent at this year's event. Organizers said they were kicked out because it was a safety issue tied to the unpopularity of CEO Elon Musk. Protesters have demonstrated outside Tesla stores in Metro Vancouver over the weekend, and some Nanaimo charging stations were torched. Tesla has been a worldwide target for vandals. Musk has been an outspoken supporter of Donald Trump's threats to annex Canada. Ottawa has put in new rules capping the amount banks can charge customers who don't have enough money in their accounts to cover a pre-authorized charge or check. Starting in March of next year, banks will only be allowed to charge $10 for non-sufficient fund checks on personal accounts. They'll also be prohibited from charging more than one fee in the span of 2 business days. The government says NSF fees disproportionately affect low-income Canadians and people with poor credit histories. Canadian politicians are reacting to Donald Trump's latest remarks about our country. The U.S. president thinks dealing with a Liberal government will be easier. Trump noting the Conservative leader is no friend of his. As CTV's Judy Trin reports, that certainly got the ear of Pierre Poilievre.
With Canada and the U.S. locked in a trade war, Donald Trump weighed in on who he wants to negotiate with.
The Conservative that's running is stupidly no friend of mine. I don't know him, but he said negative things. So When he says negative things, I couldn't care less. I think it's easier to deal, actually, with a liberal.
There was no response from the Prime Minister's office. Mark Carney spent most of the day in closed-door meetings, but his Conservative opponent addressed it within the opening minutes of his news conference in Sudbury.
It's clear that President Trump wants the Liberals in power because they will keep this country weak.
Some analysts say Trump's comments will help Pierre Poilievre fight back against Liberal attack ads like this one.
Everything is broken.
Everything is broken.
The Liberal campaign is looking to make any link they can between Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Trump, as are a number of third-party organizations right now. And this undermines all of that.
Since this November meeting in Mar-a-Lago, Trump has been talking about turning Canada into the 51st state. Before launching a trade war earlier this month, Trump spoke about using economic force against Canada. Although Canadian politicians have talked about toning down the rhetoric over tariffs, Trump is not doing the same.
They give us nothing, and they are the worst people to negotiate with.
Canada has retaliated against Trump's 25% tariffs, but the White House is expected to put more protectionist measures in within weeks.
It doesn't matter who's sitting in the Prime Minister's office up in Ottawa. The Trump administration is still going to have complaints about the United States' trade relationship with Canada being unbalanced from their perspective.
Since being sworn in, Prime Minister Carney has flown overseas to meet with the leaders of Britain and France, but has yet to speak with the American president. With an election around the corner, multiple polls show that dealing with Trump is the top issue for Canadians. Judy Trin, CTV News, Ottawa.
And as we wait for that federal election that Judy just mentioned to be called, the Conservatives are changing the way their campaign will be covered. The party saying media will not be permitted on their campaign plane or buses to follow Pierre Poilievre. The national campaign director blames rising travel costs and says outlets will be given notice of upcoming events so local reporters can still cover them. It's a shift from the past where typically political correspondents travel with party leaders during campaigns, with media organizations paying for their own travel costs. Reporters are expected to still be allowed to travel with both the Liberals and the NDP campaigns. Now to a developing story tonight. Global Affairs Canada has confirmed 4 Canadians were executed earlier this year in China. The deaths are being strongly condemned by officials in this country, and those same officials say they asked the Chinese government for clemency in these cases. However, very few details have been released and no names have been made public. Here's Rachel Aiello with more on the story.
No names have been made public, and it remains unclear how many Canadians were killed or exactly when. In a statement, Global Affairs said Canada strongly condemns China's use of the death penalty, adding that Canada repeatedly called for clemency for these individuals at the senior-most levels. The department said Canadian officials are providing consular assistance to the victims' families.
Execution of Westerners in China is rare. The last such known case, publicly known case, was more than 10 years ago. While China executes more people than any other country in the world, it is rare for them to do this with foreigners. So this is a deeply troubling development.
China's embassy in Ottawa also confirmed the executions, indicating they were connected to alleged drug crimes. In a statement, the embassy said the facts of the crimes committed by Canadian nationals in these cases were clear and the evidence is solid and sufficient, and said Chinese judicial authorities handled the cases in strict accordance with the law and fully guaranteed the rights and interests of the Canadian nationals concerned. While we're still seeking more information about the executions, the Canadian government has confirmed Robert Schellenberg from Abbotsford, BC, who was sentenced to death by a Chinese court in 2019 for drug smuggling, was not one of them. Rachel Aiello, CTV News, Ottawa.
The White House is suggesting that the United States could take control of Ukrainian power plants. The goal is to ensure their safety. Donald Trump also told his Ukrainian counterpart on a phone call today that America's expertise would be helpful in running those facilities. Trump posted a statement on Truth Social that reads in part, quote, "Just completed a very good telephone call with President Zelensky of Ukraine. It lasted approximately 1 hour. Much of the discussion was based on the call made yesterday with President Putin in order to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. The Ukrainian leader described the call as a positive, very substantive, and frank conversation. Zelensky said Trump shared details of his call with Russian President on Tuesday and confirmed that Kyiv is ready to implement a U.S. proposal that Ukraine and Russia halt attacks on each other's energy infrastructure for 30 days. All right, please do stay tuned. I'll be right back with a look at weather. But as we head to break, here's a look at today's closing market numbers.